One of my hypotheses is actually if you can embed AI and it's so embedded into your systems and your ways of working that it becomes invisible, that's when AI becomes truly scalable. As you say, we all use Google Maps to get around. That is a truly scalable AI solution because it's just no longer thought about.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined today by one of our recurring guests, one of our favourites, in fact, Richard Jeffers. Welcome back, Richard. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again, Niall. I can't remember if this is my fourth or fifth time you've invited me on. Yeah, good to see you again.
Fantastic. And this time, as I often do, I'm always looking for topics, and usually a lot of it comes internally, of course, in the big pool within Siemens and communications. But actually, it was something I saw on LinkedIn, which sort of drew me back to you, Richard, and thought it'd be an interesting topic. We're going to be talking about AI, so maybe not a surprise to people like that, a word that doesn't need any explaining to everyone. But I think you've got quite a unique experience, Richard, with both what you've been doing in your career and what you're actually doing now, because you're actually doing a PhD now, I believe, as well. So it's all coming full circle, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've always been fascinated by the use of data in asset management. I spent 5 or so years building a startup around industrial data acquisition, and then moved in the last 18 months into advising customers on how to use data and AI. And then I thought I'd get some real theoretical grounding in all of that by starting a PhD, but specifically in the challenges around scaling AI-enabled asset management decision-making. We know the technology works, is either mature or will rapidly become mature. So my research focus is on how do we actually deliver this now at scale and make sure it's embedded into businesses rather than something that sits at the side.
So before we get into sort of the real depth of what we're talking about today, Rich, I wanted to look back earlier in your career. Obviously, we couldn't predict a lot of the technological change, especially AI now. But what do you think could have been applied back then using AI, which you'd never have known about? What could have been instantly improved? Because we're talking about adoption of it now, but what about then, if we think about it hypothetically, of course?
If I think back to the start of my career, I remember plotting statistical process control charts on good old-fashioned graph paper with a pencil and a ruler. And actually, what are you trying to do on an SPC chart? You're trying to detect anomalies in your data. And so actually, a lot of the fundamentals have been around for a while. When we think about time series data, there have been ways to analyze time series data for my entire career. There have been ways to plot and graph and chart that data in a way that does allow you to interpret it. I think that AI on time series data just allowed you to do that faster with larger data sets and with more precision. I do think the introduction of large language models, though, does fundamentally change the game. And once you start thinking about the opportunities around generative AI and probabilistic models, suddenly you get a whole bunch of stuff you can do now that you would never have been able to do before, no matter what the technologies were.
And I guess because it's interesting you mentioned about manually plotting things on graph, but has data always been the sort of fundamental of what you do, whether it's in the era we're in now or over the previous sort of decade as well?
I've always seen data as being an incredibly important part of making decisions, whether that's data in terms of measuring things or data in terms of knowledge and fact. I think that has always been a really important part of how I've approached my career. I do remember on one particular project I was running that had gone quite a long way south, where we were sitting on my bedroom floor with our textbooks, thermodynamic textbooks from university, trying to work out why this project had failed by going back to physics and by going back to first principles. So the ability to base decisions on fact and not opinion has always been a part of my professional journey.
I guess that leads us nicely to what we're talking about today, because we're talking about technology that's outpacing organizations, which I don't think is a new phenomenon, but with AI, it just seems to have been, it's even faster and accelerating even faster. So, and like I said, I was drawn into a post you made on LinkedIn, or a comment actually on someone's post on LinkedIn. But what are we talking about in terms of the disconnect between what's actually capable with AI and the adoption of it? Are we still seeing a big gap between those at the moment?
I think an increasing gap, I would say, between the art of the possible within AI and the understanding of people within the CapEx operations and maintenance spheres to apply that. It was relatively easy in the days of anomaly detection to go, I'm going to build some clever maths and it's going to tell me when things are changing. Once you layer generative AI and agentic agents into that as well, it becomes fantastically difficult for non-specialists to really understand what it is and what it isn't. I was at an industry event a couple of weeks back. It was a dinner with a bunch of structured discussions around it. And we were talking about AI in asset management, obviously, because it's always going to be a topic at these events. And someone said, oh, we don't have any AI. There's no AI in our factory at all. And I was talking about modern control systems that have machine learning built into their optimization. So you do have AI in your factory. And we were talking about some of the Siemens hardware where you've got machine learning algorithms built into them. And then we go, yeah, but that's not AI, is it? It is. Machine learning is a technique within artificial intelligence. It's not the only one, and it's a deterministic, not a probabilistic technique, but it is AI. And so people are I think the gap is widening as the capabilities of AI grow between people's understanding of what it is versus the art of the possible.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting discussion, because even if you take it into everyday life, because no doubt I've certainly spoken to people as well, they go, oh, AI, no, I don't use it at all. And then you think about all the different, even in an iPhone alone, right, using various different types, or Google Maps, things like this, you use AI in the background. So, yeah, people just don't see it. If they don't feel it and see it and can tangibly touch it in a way, they just can't imagine it. So that's amazing to say no AI in our factory. Was that said proudly, do you think?
It was actually said, we're so behind, we don't have any AI in our factory. It's like, you do. Yeah. And I think one of the hypotheses that I'm exploring in my PhD is actually that maybe AI becomes really powerful when it does disappear below the waterline. Once people stop thinking about it as AI and it's just another tool, people don't think about PLCs controlling their factories. I mean, they do when they open the control panel and see one, but they don't really think about them. They just exist to run your factory. And one of my hypotheses is actually, if you can embed AI and it's so embedded into your systems and your ways of working that it becomes invisible, that's when AI becomes truly scalable. As you say, we all use Google Maps to get around. That is a truly scalable AI solution because it's just no longer thought about.
Exactly. And you're right. You can see that exactly happening in industrial AI. It's just because it's front and center in everyone's mind. But what I wanted to touch on as well, so you talked about an increasing gap. So why is that gap increasing?
I think because the pace of change of new AI capabilities is accelerating so rapidly. We're definitely in the upward flick of the hockey stick curve in terms of capability growth. That I just think most people, because they have a day job to do, which is not thinking about AI, most people just can't keep up. And that's not a criticism. It's because they've got a day job to concentrate on, not trying to track the emerging capabilities of AI. I'm lucky because that is my day job. But for most people, it's not.
Yeah. And it's the same for any technology, right? Because you could think, even if we talk about a Senseye perspective, you think predictive maintenance must be the number one thing on their minds every day. But of course, the actual day job is on their minds every day.
Yeah, people don't come into work and go, I must base some AI today. They come into work and go, I've got these jobs to be done. I need to deliver those. And if we talk about, we can't elevate AI to the same level as their activity. We've got to have AI as a tool to enable their jobs to be done, not as the job to be done.
And you touched on before about this, because now generative AI is the thing. And so everyone just thinks that's AI. That's the definition of AI. But of course, you've mentioned machine learning and other techniques. And I wonder, when you're trying to explain to operational teams about the differences, and you touched on it there, how do you explain that they are one and the same thing? We're just in a new sort of advancement on that.
I normally just talk about there's a whole range of tools that sit within the headline of AI. In the same way, there's a whole range of tools that sit under the lean umbrella. There's a whole range of tools that sit underneath the AI umbrella. And we might be talking about machine learning models to do prediction and statistical analysis. We might be talking about optimization engines. We might be talking about generative AI and LLMs. We might be talking about agentic systems where we're giving instructions, or we might be talking about physics-based models. But they're all different types of AI capability. And it's not that one's better or worse. It's like saying what's better, a spanner or a hammer. So it depends what you want to do. What you shouldn't be doing is using your spanner as a hammer. So understanding the capabilities of the different tools and how they bolt together is where the magic happens. But nobody inside a factory has got the bandwidth to do that. You need to let the technologists worry about that. You just go, it's just AI, and I'll just accept the fact there's a whole bunch of capabilities inside there.
Yeah, and I've really that just more broadly than AI. Because I remember speaking to one of our customers, and they described that Senseye is a tool in their toolbox. Right, it's not the only tool, and I don't think we don't even claim to be the only solution to. Because there's preventative maintenance and different techniques, right? And predictive maintenance is the tool that they want to use for a specific asset type or certain types of assets or production line. So that's interesting. You've compared that sort of, if you get down to the AI, the detail on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think just another point on that, keeping up with this is hard work. This is a significant proportion of my job. I read a huge amount of stuff on AI and asset management for my PhD because I'm researching it. And yet I am behind the developer team that I work with because they are at the cutting edge of what the tooling will do. So they all joke about me pretending to be an expert in AI because they think I'm a Luddite. But actually, I'm an expert in the application of it, but I'm not an expert in the technology itself because I can't keep up. There's too much of it. I have to rely on specialists to do that.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same. I still feel behind the curve. When I speak to Senseye's head of research, James, he never says it right. I just ask him. I'm like, is this the tool I should be using for this? Yeah, no, absolutely. And this kind of thing. I completely get that as well. But do you think that gap in awareness, you say even yourself, who's very much embedded in the topic in a number of different ways, but is there misunderstandings about AI, what it can do, what it can't do, what it's going to do? I guess it's all...
massive misunderstanding. And even the difference, even something quite fundamental, like the difference between deterministic AI and probabilistic AI, which for me is pretty fundamental understanding, is not there. And therefore people assume things that can and cannot be done without understanding when is it a probabilistic model versus a deterministic model. So you take what you guys do with Senseye PDM, you are analysing time series data using some algorithms, and that builds out a deterministic solution. In that if you put the same data through it twice, you'll get the same output because you're getting this is right or this is wrong. Whereas a probabilistic model, you are looking for converging on a truth through a number of different routes. And LLMs are very much probabilistic tools, and they are amazing at some things and rubbish at other things. You wouldn't stick a time series data set into ChatGPT and say, analyze that for me, because it's the wrong tool.
Yeah. And you're right. It's coming back to that idea of using the right tool for the right situation. If you get more granular than that, if you use a certain generative AI tool, it's using which model for the right one. I was listening to a podcast the other day when they were talking about you don't use the sledgehammer to crack open a nut, or whether it's where deep research is required. You're asking something very simple, and then you use like the deep research model to answer the question. Right.
Yeah, I made that mistake once of setting my ChatGPT settings to deep research and blew through my entire month's subscription of tokens in about 2 hours, and then realised it's because I'd screwed up my settings. So fortunately, it cost me 20 quid. But you've got to choose the right tool at the right point in time.
Yeah, and I guess if we look at sort of use cases specifically, so where and the key to this is also, so we could talk about AI and different types of AI, but where it's actually proving value. And I guess we could start in the maintenance asset management space, so well. So what's actually creating value at the moment?
So I'll start off with something you can do yourself within a decent quality LLM if you know how to use the tool. So I use ChatGPT extensively for accelerating reliability centered maintenance studies. I've spent a lot of time building out my instructions so that I truly follow the RCM methodology, and I've got templates so that I produce the output in a consistent format every time I run it. And iterating RCM studies through my ChatGPT model is amazing for accelerating the development of fact-based maintenance studies. You still need to recognize that it is probabilistic, therefore you still need to have an experienced engineer validating the output, so I wouldn't just take them blindly. But it does take something that would have taken man weeks to do. I can now turn around high quality output in man hours. And that's something that's within most people's reach if you understand how to use the tool. But even then, you need to recognize that different LLMs are different. many people have said to me, "Oh, I've tried it in Copilot, it's rubbish." It would be, because that's not what Copilot is designed to do. Copilot is designed to smooth integration between Microsoft 365 tools. It's not designed to do deep thinking on technical subjects. That's what you need a Claude or a ChatGPT to do. So even within LLMs, you need to recognize there's different tools. Another area that we've made a lot of progress with my technology partners is around spare part master data. We know that spare part master data tends to be quite low quality across most businesses. It's a recurring problem. And therefore you end up with huge amounts of duplicates that you can't, and therefore you end up with huge amounts of unrequired stock because it's just duplicated. But you can use a combination of AI tools to actually improve the quality of that data, cleanse it, and then start to look for true duplicates within that. And that's definitely using a mix of deterministic and probabilistic AI to do that.
Yeah, I like that angle of mix of AI, because again, I think there's certain clients, because it would be naive to think that certain clients, they might use obviously AI is built into Senseye, but there's also generative AI and Copilot, so they might use, or they do use that, but then they're also using, maybe without their organisations knowing, maybe Claude and ChatGPT. And I don't know whether that's what you're referring to specifically, but the example I've heard is doing stuff in ChatGPT and then bring it in to Senseye to use it that way as additional context.
Yeah, again, I think you shouldn't be afraid to move stuff around between tools as well. You ask the same question. It's like asking the same question of different people. You ask 5 people the same question, and then you triangulate the results.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's a good way to think about it as well. I guess if we shift on to adoption, I know, because we talked just before this, so I'm talking to Pontus, who you introduced, so there'll be a podcast recorded very soon where we focus fully on adoption, but I'd love to get your sort of take on that as well. And maybe there's I guess, first of all, like a fundamental sort of misunderstanding of what it takes to adopt AI. It's just, we'll do a bit of ChatGPT on the side and that'll do, kind of thing. But of course, we know it. If the real deep success, you need to go and look beyond that for some use cases.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great research in publications like Harvard Business Review around AI adoption challenges. Businesses are investing millions, if not billions, in adopting AI at the moment. Just because you've given everybody access to Copilot as an individual productivity tool, it doesn't mean that you're suddenly an expert in it. I've had Excel my entire working career, and I probably can use 10% of the capability of Excel. Give someone Copilot, and you'll scrape the surface of what's capable in it, because you've not trained people in how to use the tool properly. You've just assumed we'll throw it out there and people will use it. And some people will, and some people will deliver genuine productivity improvements, but the vast majority of people won't deliver improvement. And the areas that I'm looking at are, what are those barriers to adoption? Because as I started at the beginning, technical is not the barrier to AI adoption. You've got a whole bunch of different reasons that are not driving forward. I think so. There's a whole range of different reasons why people are not adopting AI, and this is very much where my PhD research is going to be focused. You've got technical is not the reason that's getting in the way of adoption, because the models either work or will work. Cybersecurity is a reason that needs to be understood, but again, it's not the only barrier, and that's more of a technical barrier again. I'm looking at the psychological barriers around people perceiving AI as a threat and a willingness to rely on AI outputs. I'm looking at the epistemic issues, so the issues around truth, so explainability and legitimacy of the AI outputs and making sure that aligns with AI judgment. I'm looking at the organizational reasons. So what's your governance framework? How is it built into operational workflows? What are the decision-making rights around AI? And then the economic ones. People are spending a lot of money, but are they spending it creating value? So does the business case, is there clarity around the business case? Are people really understanding the cost versus value? People understanding how to create value. Because if you see AI as purely an individual productivity tool, you're looking at going, I've got a team of 6 and I can sack one of them and get a team of 5 doing the same amount of work. But actually, if you look at AI as a enablement tool, and suddenly I can make the team of 6 do the work that is just been impossible, because they've never had the bandwidth to do it. That's where the real value, I believe, is going to come from AI as an enablement tool, not as an individual productivity tool.
Yeah, and we talked about there's even a lot more I can do in terms of professional productivity. I have a recurring conversation going on with actually a former sort of Siemens colleague, actually, where we talk about AI in a lot of depth and in IoT and industrial IoT as well. He actually goes in and does training, like prompt training. I know we're only talking about one aspect, again, of AI, but it's just how crucial that part is, right? Because you could only be using asking the very basic questions, and that's it. And you might get some productivity gains, but there's just a lot more to unearth than that, of course, isn't there?
Yeah, and like all tools, there's some really simple things you can do to make the tool much more powerful. If you're in any LLM and you've written your prompt, make sure you finish it with ask questions, and then the tool will ask you questions before doing the work. And then once you've got your answer, make sure you ask it to give you a red team review. And those two simple things will dramatically increase your personal productivity. A great technique with ChatGPT is to ask ChatGPT what do you need to do differently to get more value out of ChatGPT? And it'll train you. It'll tell you what to do.
Thanks. Maybe that's quite a simple starting point. And that was going to be my next question, actually, around AI literacy in terms of what are the risks if people continue to go, I'm not going to focus on AI. We can only presume that there are lots of organisations out there still that are putting it on the back burner for whatever reason. There could be lots of reasons. But if we particularly talk about in the asset management space, so engineering, maintenance, what are the risks associated if it continues to be deprioritised looking at those use cases?
So I firmly believe that AI will not replace a good quality reliability engineer, but good reliability engineers who can use AI will replace reliability engineers who can't use AI, because it is such, in the same way that if you couldn't use Excel, you would lag behind. If you can't use generative AI, you will soon lag behind your colleagues who can. Because they are incredibly powerful tools, but they take learning and they take understanding of their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, no, I like that. So it strengthens someone's position. If we go back to the tool in the toolbox again, it's like having a toolbox, your colleague having a toolbox full of things they can use to diagnose a certain situation or offer advice or ask different opinions. Again, what you mentioned before versus, again, I know there's always a lot of talk about instinct, and I know my machines and this kind of thing, which is of course still a very important factor, but it's just another helpful aid to that.
Exactly, in the same way that a condition monitoring engineer with a thermal camera will deliver more value than one without a thermal camera. An asset management professional with a deep understanding of AI will deliver more value than ones that don't.
No, absolutely, completely agree with that. So I guess we're coming to the end. I know I always seem to forget with recurring guest Richard, I've just introduced a lightning round recently.
Cool.
The podcast, which I don't think I've provided those questions in advance, and there's a reason for that, to keep you on your toes. So we'll come to that in a second. But before we do, and again, it's one of these questions of the future because things change within a month. If we look ahead, what, from your point of view, in the next couple of years, let's say, would good AI adoption look like? Or we could go even shorter than that. We could go short term and medium term and long term, maybe, to split it up, because maybe that's a good way to look at it.
I think people who truly extract value out of AI in the asset life cycle will recognize the recursive nature of decision making in the asset life cycle. Every decision you make in asset management is connected to every other decision you make. And every decision you make needs to enrich the underpinning data that you then use to make future decisions. So let me bring this to life. I have some spare parts, but actually those spare parts exist me to protect me from risk. So I need to understand the risk appetite of the business. Whether I've got the right spare parts is driven by a reliability study. So I buy an asset, I get a list of spares recommended by the OEM, but what I do is I validate those with a AI-enabled reliability study to make sure that they are truly required and linked to failure modes. I then use an AI tool to reconcile those against my existing spare part base to make sure I'm not creating duplicates in that spare part master data. During the operate phase, I'm looking at recurring problems and doing structured problem solving. and I'm using those to further optimize my operational and PM standards, but I'm also using them to rewrite my engineering standards for when I buy the next asset. During the maintain stage, I'm looking at consumption of spare parts and seeing have I optimized that consumption, and are my PMs actually addressing problems and mitigating risk. And then during the retire phase, I'm looking at my spare parts that are now obsolete and seeing how I can redeploy those across my asset base onto future assets. And all those decisions are interconnected at every stage. So I think for me, how are we really going to trade true value out of AI and asset management is by using it to connect all those disparate and fragmented decisions that currently exist into one coherent whole.
And I guess what you can do throughout that is you build use case upon use case, but it's not about starting with all of those at once, right? You could start simple and just continue to layer on additional use cases as you start to see the value.
Yeah, exactly. We've started with spare parts because we thought we could translate it into financial value the fastest. But already we're seeing other areas. We're using AI to automatically generate the asset hierarchy from a P&ID drawing. That saves hours and days of effort. We're then using that asset hierarchy to automatically generate a design stage RCM study so that we can launch that asset with a good enough maintenance schedule from day one. These things can all develop independently of each other, but they all need to be part of a coherent whole.
Absolutely. That's great. So let's look at the lightning round now. So it's very simple. So I'll ask you a question, Rich, and give you 3 possible answers for it. And it's the first one that sort of resonates with you. So the first one. So what's the biggest blocker to AI adoption? Is it understanding, trust, or culture?
I'm actually going to go all 3 because they all impact in different ways. So I'm going to cop out and say they all need to be addressed.
Okay, I'll allow it just this once. Most overused AI words. So intelligence, autonomous, or disruptive.
Oh, it's got to be disruptive. I hate that word. And you didn't have digital twin in your list, but actually my most favourite hated AI phrase is definitely digital twin.
Okay, interesting. And last question. So AI's real role in maintenance, is it augmentation, acceleration, or enablement? And you've got to say
I think it's about augmenting people within the asset management sphere. So maintenance is part of that cycle, but actually all those asset management decisions are connected. It's not just about maintenance. So augmenting thinking and capabilities in the asset management sphere.
Fantastic. So well done. You survived. And I'll let you off with number 1 as well, but that's fine as well. But no, thank you so much. Such an interesting topic. Again, like I said to you before, we've got some other great guests and interview. We always have great guests, of course, but some great topics around AI and also change management and other things as well. We're going to go together into a series. But for today, Richard, great to have you on again. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. We'll have you on again soon, no doubt.
Good to see you again, Niall. Catch you again soon.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for everyone out there for listening, wherever you are, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.